You're just a crawfish-eating inbred hillbilly who bought his law degree from some Louisiana swap meet. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's voice boomed through the Senate hearing room, carrying the confidence of someone who'd never lost a Twitter argument. Her phone, live streaming to 2.8 million Instagram followers, captured every moment as she stood at the witness table, pointing straight at Senator John Kennedy. The 73-year-old senator from Louisiana looked up from his yellow legal pad, where he'd been doodling what looked like a duck, or maybe a crawfish. Behind his thick glasses, his eyes twinkled with what might have been amusement. "Your generation destroyed our planet while counting your oil money," AOC continued, playing to her online audience. "And now you sit here pretending to be some simple country lawyer, when really you're just another fossil fuel puppet." Kennedy carefully set down his pencil and opened a thin manila folder labeled AOC Ethics Review. "Congresswoman," he said mildly, his Louisiana drawl thick as molasses, "I appreciate you taking time from your busy schedule to educate us simple folk." "That's mighty generous. Now, since we're talking about destroying the planet and all, I was wondering if you could help me understand something. You know, just some simple arithmetic about your Green New Deal. Oh, and maybe explain these receipts I found." The smile never left his face, but something in his tone made AOC's confident smirk falter for just a moment. What happened next would end a political career, spawn 1,000 memes, and give birth to a new term in Washington: getting Kennedy'd. This is that story. The hearing room buzzed with tension as AOC continued her live stream to 2.8 million followers. Behind her, young staffers in Green New Deal t-shirts filled the gallery, phones raised like weapons. "This fossil from Louisiana is about to learn what happens when you mess with the squad," she declared, zooming her camera on Kennedy's rumpled figure. The 73-year-old senator was doodling on a yellow legal pad, seemingly oblivious. Chairman Graham gavelled for order. "Today, we'll hear testimony on the Green Energy Transition Act." Representative Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, positioned herself perfectly for the camera. "Before I begin, let's talk about Senator Kennedy. He's taken $2 million from Big Oil. He voted against every climate bill. He's everything wrong with Washington." Kennedy looked up mildly. $2 million. Let me check my bank account. Nope. Still can't afford the good coffee. Must have gone to my other pants. The gallery laughed at what they assumed was a pathetic joke. AOC smirked. "This is what we're dealing with, people. A man who jokes while our planet burns." "Oh, I take climate change seriously," Kennedy said, still doodling. "Just like I take your Green New Deal seriously. Speaking of which," he pulled out a thin folder labeled AOC Ethics Review, "I've got some questions. Simple arithmetic. Think you can help this old hillbilly understand?" AOC leaned back confidently. "Educate away, Senator. Though your big oil donors won't like what they hear." Kennedy smiled, the expression of a prosecutor who'd just heard the defendant confess. "Well, then, let's begin. Sometimes I get confused about who's schooling whom, but I'm sure that's not a problem for someone as smart as you." Veteran reporters exchanged knowing glances. When Kennedy talked about simple arithmetic, someone was about to get destroyed. The trap was set. The prey had taken the bait. Kennedy fumbled with his reading glasses, dropping them once and apologizing profusely. AOC's live stream audience ate it up, comments flying about "Grandpa needs his nap" and "Someone check if he's having a stroke." She smirked at the camera, secure in her dominance. "Now, Congresswoman," Kennedy began, his voice carrying that distinctive Louisiana drawl that city folks always mistook for stupidity. "I've been trying to understand this Green New Deal of yours. It sounds wonderful, Jobs for everyone. Clean air. Saving the polar bears. Who doesn't love polar bears? Magnificent creatures, though I've never seen one in person. Have you? AOC's eye roll was practically audible. Senator, while you're rambling about zoo animals, the planet is literally burning. The Green New Deal is a comprehensive— Oh, I know it's comprehensive, Kennedy interrupted gently, pulling out a document. Very comprehensive. In fact, I've got a copy right here. All 14 pages of it. That's quite impressive. 14 whole pages to remake the entire American economy. Why, the instructions for my coffee maker are longer than that. Scattered laughter from the gallery. AOC's supporters tried to start a "let her speak" chant, but it fizzled out. But here's what confuses me, Kennedy continued, adjusting his glasses again. And forgive me if this is a dumb question. I didn't have to go to Boston University like you did. Fine school, by the way, very expensive. But anyway, your proposal says we're going to retrofit every building in America in 10 years. Every single one. That's— he pulled out a calculator that looked older than AOC. About 5.6 million commercial buildings and 140 million housing units. He punched a number slowly, deliberately. Carry the 1, multiply by H. That comes out to about 145.6 million buildings in 10 years. That's, let's see, about 40,000 buildings per day, including weekends and holidays. AOC leaned forward aggressively. Senator, when FDR proposed the New Deal, pessimists like you said it was impossible, too. But American innovation— Oh, I love FDR, Kennedy interjected. Great president. Though I notice he didn't promise to rebuild every structure in America while also eliminating airplanes and cow farts. But maybe I missed that part in my history books. They were probably outdated like me. He pulled out another sheet, this one with MIT's letterhead clearly visible. Speaking of American innovation, I asked some smart folks at MIT, that's in Massachusetts near you, to help me with the math. They're not hillbillies like me, so I figured they'd understand better. According to their analysis, he continued, running his finger along the text, retrofitting every building would cost approximately $4.2 trillion. That's trillion with a T. That's just the buildings, mind you, not the high-speed rail to replace airplanes or the electric cars or the job guarantees or the free college or the universal health care. AOC's phone started buzzing with notifications. The comment stream on her live stream was slowing down. Some viewers asking, "Is that true?" and "Where did he get those numbers?" But wait, Kennedy said, warming to his theme. It gets better, or worse, depending on your perspective. Harvard's economics department, a bunch of liberals up there, so you can't accuse them of bias, did their own study. They calculated the total cost of your Green New Deal at— he paused dramatically— $93 trillion over 10 years. A gasp ran through the hearing room. Even some of AOC's supporters looked shocked. That's impossible, AOC snapped. Those are fossil fuel propaganda numbers. Well, now I thought you might say that, Kennedy replied mildly. So I also got an analysis from the Congressional Budget Office. That's the nonpartisan group that scores all our bills. They're about as exciting as watching paint dry, but they're good with numbers. They came up with $89 trillion. So a little less than Harvard, but still. He pulled out a simple chart. Let me put this in perspective for folks watching at home. The entire U.S. economy, everything we produce in a year, is about $21 trillion. Your plan costs more than 4 times our entire economy. That's like saying you're going to buy a car that costs 4 times more than all the money you'll make in your entire life. You're not accounting for the cost of inaction, AOC protested, her voice rising. Climate change will cost— Oh, I've got those numbers too, Kennedy said cheerfully, producing another document. The Stern Review on Climate Change, the most comprehensive economic analysis ever done, estimates climate change will reduce global GDP by 5 to 20% by 2100. Bad news for sure, but your plan would reduce it by 100% right now because we'd be bankrupt. He pulled out yet another paper. But let's get real specific. Your plan promises a job to everyone who wants one at union wages. According to your own FAQ, which you took down from your website, but the internet remembers everything, you also promise to provide economic security to those unwilling to work. AOC's face flushed. That was taken out of context. Ma'am, I've got the screenshot right here, Kennedy said, holding it up. It's hard to take a screenshot out of context. It's like saying a photograph of you robbing a bank was taken out of context. The context is you were robbing a bank. The gallery had gone quiet. Even her most ardent supporters were listening now. But here's my favorite part, Kennedy continued, clearly enjoying himself. Now, to pay for all this, you suggested we just print more money. Modern monetary theory, you called it. Very modern, very theoretical. You know who else tried that? Zimbabwe. They printed so much money that a loaf of bread cost 35 million Zimbabwean dollars. People needed wheelbarrows to carry cash to buy groceries. Is that the future you're proposing? That's a completely false comparison, AOC started. Is it, though? Kennedy pulled out an email printout. This is from your former chief of staff, Mr. Saikat Chakrabarti. Nice fellow. Worth about $41 million, I hear. Not bad for a socialist. Anyway, he wrote, and I quote, "The Green New Deal wasn't originally a climate thing at all. We really think of it as a how do you change the entire economy thing." He looked up from the paper. Change the entire economy, not save the planet. Change the economy. That sounds less like environmental policy and more like, what's that word? Oh yes, socialism. Democratic socialism, AOC corrected hotly. Ah, yes. Democratic socialism, Kennedy nodded. That's like saying democratic bank robbery. You still lose all your money, but at least you got to vote on it. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. AOC's Instagram viewer count had started dropping. Comments were shifting from supportive to skeptical. Kennedy pulled out one final document from the first section of his folder. But let's talk about what this means for real people, not Instagram followers or Twitter warriors, but folks who work for a living. According to this analysis by the American Action Forum, and they show their work, unlike your 14-page dream journal, the Green New Deal would cost each American household approximately $600,000 over 10 years. He peered over his glasses at AOC. That's $60,000 per year per household. The median household income in America is $67,000. You're asking families to pay almost their entire income just for your environmental plan. They'd have about $7,000 left to live on for the whole year. How's that going to work? We never said families would pay directly, AOC stammered. Oh, so it's free? Kennedy asked innocently, like those sample cookies at the grocery store? No, ma'am. Someone always pays either through taxes, inflation, or reduced services. There's no such thing as free money. Even I know that, and I'm just a simple country lawyer. He closed the first section of his folder with a decisive snap. You know, Congresswoman, where I come from, we have a saying. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken, no matter how much mayonnaise you add. Your Green New Deal is a lot of mayonnaise, but underneath, the math just doesn't work. And speaking of things that don't work, he added, opening the second section of his folder, let's talk about your campaign finance. You seem to care a lot about money and politics. Dark money, you call it. Evil stuff. So, I'm sure you'll be happy to explain some of these interesting financial arrangements we've discovered. AOC's phone buzzed insistently. Her staff was signaling frantically from the back of the room. The Instagram Live viewer count had dropped below 2 million and was falling fast. But she was trapped. Walking out would look like defeat. Staying meant more of whatever Kennedy had in that folder. She gripped the table edge, knuckles white, and tried to project a confidence she no longer felt. I have nothing to hide, Senator, unlike you and your big oil donors. Kennedy smiled gently, the expression of a chess player who had just seen checkmate 6 moves ahead. Big oil donors? Yes, we'll get to donors. But first, let's talk about Justice Democrats' PAC, Brand New Congress LLC, and something called, what was it? Oh yes, strategic consulting. Fascinating stuff. Really opened my eyes to how modern politics works. He licked his thumb and turned to a new page, moving with the deliberate patience of someone who had all day and a captive audience. Shall we begin? Kennedy took his time arranging the papers from his second folder, occasionally glancing up at AOC with the mild curiosity of an entomologist studying a particularly interesting beetle. The hearing room had taken on the tense atmosphere of a courtroom just before a devastating cross-examination. "Now, Congresswoman," he began, his voice carrying that deceptive softness that had fooled many an opponent. "You talk a lot about getting money out of politics. Dark money, you call it. Evil stuff that corrupts our democracy. I couldn't agree more. Money in politics is like kudzu. Once it takes root, it's mighty hard to kill." AOC straightened in her chair, sensing an opportunity to regain ground. "Exactly, Senator. Which is why I don't take any corporate PAC money. My campaign is 100% grassroots funded, unlike grassroots," Kennedy exclaimed with apparent delight. "What a wonderful word. Makes me think of home, watching the grass grow by the bayou. Of course, sometimes what looks like grass turns out to be something else entirely. Weeds, maybe. Or sometimes folks paint concrete green and call it a lawn." He pulled out a document dense with numbers and legal text. "Speaking of painting things green, let's talk about your grassroots campaign. Says here you raised $4.6 million in your first campaign. Mighty impressive for a bartender. No offense, bartending is honest work. I made a mean mint julep in my day." "The people supported my message," AOC started. "Oh, I'm sure they did," Kennedy agreed amiably. "But which people exactly? See, I've got these Federal Election Commission reports here, and they tell an interesting story. Your campaign paid about $20,000 to something called Brand New Congress LLC for strategic consulting. That's a nice vague term, like calling a skunk a striped kitty." He adjusted his readers, squinting at the fine print. "But then I noticed something curious. Your chief of staff, Mr. Chakrabarty, the millionaire socialist. He founded Brand New Congress LLC. He also founded Justice Democrats PAC. And both of these organizations were paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to Brand New Congress LLC. It's like a financial merry-go-round, except instead of painted horses, it's got dollar signs." AOC's confident expression began to crack. "Those organizations helped elect progressives across the country." "Did they now?" Kennedy pulled out a chart that looked like a spiderweb drawn by someone with too much coffee and time. "Let me see if this old brain can follow the money. Justice Democrats PEC raised money. They gave that money to Brand New Congress LLC. Brand New Congress LLC then provided services to your campaign at below-market rates. That's like me giving you $100, you giving it to your cousin, And your cousin buying you a $100 gift, except in this case it was about $885,000. Gasps echoed through the hearing room. Several reporters were furiously typing on their phones. But wait, Kennedy continued, clearly enjoying himself. It gets more interesting. According to these emails obtained through proper FOIA channels, all legal and above board, Mr. Chakrabarti wrote, "We set up Brand New Congress, LLC, to work around FEC rules. It's technically legal, but it's definitely in the gray area." He looked up at AOC with mock concern. Gray area? That's like being a little bit pregnant or mostly honest. You're either following the law or you're not. There's no gray in black and white. Those emails are taken out of context, AOC protested, her voice climbing higher. Context, Kennedy mused. There's that word again. All right, let's add some context. He pulled out another email. This one's from you to Mr. Chakrabarti. Make sure the FEC filings look clean. We can't afford another investigation like the one in 2018. Another investigation. What was that about? AOC's face had gone from flushed to pale. Her phone continued buzzing with notifications, staff trying desperately to do damage control on social media. "Oh, here it is," Kennedy said, finding another document. "Turns out you were investigated for potentially illegal coordination between your campaign and Justice Democrats' PAC. The FEC deadlocked on party lines, so no charges were filed. But the Republican commissioners wrote, and this is interesting, there is substantial evidence of illegal coordination, but we lack the votes to proceed." "That's because it was a partisan witch hunt," AOC snapped. "Witch hunt," Kennedy repeated thoughtfully. "Funny how investigations are always witch hunts when they're about you, but speaking truth to power when they're about others. It's like my grandson with his report card. When he gets an A, he's a genius. When he gets an F, the teacher's unfair." He pulled out another set of documents. "But let's move on to my favorite part. Your campaign reported paying Mr. Riley Roberts, that's your boyfriend, correct, for marketing services, $6,000. Now, I'm not one to judge. My wife helps with my campaigns too. But here's the funny thing. Mr. Roberts wasn't listed anywhere as a paid employee until after a complaint was filed. Riley provided legitimate services." "I'm sure he did," Kennedy agreed. "Though it's interesting that you've publicly stated he doesn't work for your campaign. In fact, you got quite upset when people suggested he did. Called it a conspiracy theory. But here's the FEC filing showing payments. Is the FEC filing a conspiracy theory too? Because if it is, that's a federal crime. Filing false conspiracy theories with the government is generally frowned upon." Kennedy pulled out a photo, a screenshot from Instagram. "Speaking of Mr. Roberts, this is from the Met Gala. Beautiful couple. That dress with 'Tax the Rich' on it. Powerful statement. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, I noticed something interesting in your financial disclosures." He produced another document. "Your campaign paid $3,700 to someone named Juan de Anís Gonzalez for training. Then another $850 to Bombazo Dance Company also for training. What kind of training exactly? Because I looked up Bombazo Dance Company. They teach salsa dancing." The room erupted in murmurs. Even some Democrats on the committee were leaning forward with interest. "Now I'm all for professional development," Kennedy continued. "I took a square dancing class once. Terrible at it. Kept stepping on my partner's feet, but I paid for it myself. Didn't occur to me to charge the taxpayers because that's what your member representational allowance is. Taxpayer money." "Those expenses were from campaign funds," AOC protested. "Were they?" Kennedy pulled out another document. Because I've got your MRA disbursement report right here. And there they are. Juan D. Gonzalez, Bombazo Dance Company. Unless there are two Juan D. Gonzalezes teaching you what exactly, how to dance around campaign finance law. He pulled out yet another document. But here's where it gets really interesting. We couldn't find any Juan D. Gonzalez registered as a campaign vendor in any database. We couldn't find any record of Bombazo Dance Company doing political training. What we did find was that Juan Gonzalez, no middle initial, is a salsa instructor in Queens who posts on Instagram about teaching celebrities and politicians. Kennedy looked directly at AOC. You know what this looks like? It looks like you used taxpayer money to pay for dance lessons and tried to hide it by calling it training. Where I come from, we call that fraud. F-R-A-U-D. Even us hillbillies can spell that one. This is ridiculous, AOC exploded. You're nitpicking small expenses while taking millions from oil companies. Millions? Kennedy asked mildly. Let me check. He made a show of checking his phone, fumbling with it awkwardly. According to Open Secrets, that's the nonpartisan group that tracks campaign contributions. I've received $247,000 from energy companies over my entire Senate career. That's 6 years. You've been in Congress 4 years and already have $885,000 in questionable PAC transfers, $6,000 to your boyfriend, and now dance lessons charged to taxpayers. At this rate, you'll pass my corruption in about, let me calculate, next Tuesday. The hearing room was dead silent, except for the sound of typing from the press section. But we're not done yet, Kennedy said, opening a new section of his folder. Let's talk about the Committee to Protect Medicare. Never heard of them. Neither had I. But they spent $93,000 on Facebook ads supporting your campaign. Except, here's the funny thing. They're not registered as a political committee. They're a 501c4 social welfare organization. Dark money, Congresswoman. The very thing you claim to oppose. He pulled out printouts of Facebook ads. These ads didn't say vote for AOC because that would be illegal. They said, call Congress and thank AOC for fighting for Medicare. Same difference, but technically legal. Gray area, as your friend, Mr. Chakrabarty, would say. I can't control what outside groups do, AOC started. No, but you can refuse their help, Kennedy countered. You can denounce them. You can return contributions from people associated with them. Did you do any of that? Let me check. No, no, and no. In fact, you tweeted, here it is. Thanks to everyone working to protect health care. That same day, they spent $50,000 on ads for you. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with those deceptively mild eyes. You know what bothers me most about all this? It's not the money, though. Lord knows $885,000 would feed a lot of families in Louisiana. It's the hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. That spells hypocrite, in case you're taking notes. You sit there with your Instagram followers and your Twitter army pretending to be different, pretending to be pure, but you're playing the same games as everyone else. You just paint it green and call it a revolution. That's like putting lipstick on a pig and calling it Miss America. The pig might look better, but it's still going to roll in the mud. Kennedy closed the second section of his folder. Where I come from, we have a saying, that dog won't hunt and that boat won't float. Your holier-than-thou act about money and politics. That dog ran off, and that boat's at the bottom of the bayou. AOC's Instagram Live had dropped below 1.5 million viewers. The comments had turned from supportive to skeptical to outright hostile. She's a fraud. Dance lessons with tax money. Rules for thee, but not for me. Now then, Kennedy said, reaching for the third section of his folder, should we talk about the Met Gala? Because that's a whole other kettle of fish. And these fish, Congresswoman, they stink to high heaven. Kennedy held up the now famous photograph of AOC at the Met Gala. Her white Aurora James dress emblazoned with "Tax the Rich" in bold red letters across the back. He studied it with the expression of an art critic examining a particularly pretentious piece of modern art. Now this, he said slowly, this is something special. Tax the Rich, written on a dress that cost more than most Americans make in a month, at a party where tickets cost $35,000 apiece. It's like wearing a Save the Whales t-shirt to a sushi restaurant. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. AOC lifted her chin defiantly. It was a political statement. I was invited as a guest of the museum. A guest? Kennedy exclaimed with apparent delight. How nice. I get invited to things too. Last week, the Rotary Club invited me to their fish fry. I brought my own fish. Didn't occur to me to have someone else pay for everything while I lectured them about sharing their wealth. And he pulled out a document marked with House Ethics Committee letterhead. But let's talk about this invitation. According to this report, you received a dress valued at approximately $10,000, shoes worth $800, a handbag valued at $1,200, and jewelry worth about $3,500. That's just what you wore. We haven't gotten to the hair, makeup, and transportation yet. The dress was borrowed, AOC interjected. Borrowed? Kennedy repeated, savoring the word. That's an interesting way to put it. When my neighbor loans me his lawnmower, I give it back. Did you give the dress back? Let's check. No, you kept it. In fact, you had it framed. That's not borrowing. That's keeping. We have another word for taking something and not giving it back. But I'm too polite to use it in mixed company. He pulled out another document. But here's where it gets really interesting. The House Ethics Committee rules say members of Congress can't accept gifts worth more than $50. $50. Your outfit was worth more than $15,000. That's not bending the rules. That's breaking them like a piñata at a birthday party. I was there in my official capacity. Official capacity. Kennedy's eyebrows rose. Was there a vote on the Met Gala dance floor? Were you negotiating legislation between champagne toasts? Because from these photos, he pulled out several more, it looks like you were taking selfies with celebrities and eating food that costs more per plate than a minimum wage worker makes in a week. He adjusted his readers, peering at another document. Speaking of payment, let's talk about when you finally did pay for all this. According to the Ethics Committee report, you didn't pay for anything until after they started investigating. That's 2 years later. 2 years. I've seen glaciers move faster than your checkbook. There was confusion about who was responsible. Confusion? Kennedy mused. Yes, ethics can be confusing. Should I take thousands of dollars in free stuff? Should I pay my bills? These are apparently complex questions in New York. In Louisiana, we keep it simple. If it ain't yours and you can't afford it, don't take it. He pulled out an email chain. But it gets better. These emails between your staff and the various vendors show they were desperately trying to get paid. The makeup artist wrote, and I quote, "It's been 6 months. I have bills to pay. Please respond." Your chief of staff replied, "Stop contacting us or we'll consider it harassment." Gasps ran through the hearing room. Even Democrats on the committee looked uncomfortable. Harassment, Kennedy repeated. Asking to be paid for work is harassment. That's like saying the bank harasses you when they want their mortgage payment. Though I suppose in socialist economics, maybe that's how it works. He pulled out another photo from the Met Gala. But let's talk about your fellow attendees. Here you are with the CEO of Goldman Sachs. Here's one with a hedge fund billionaire. Oh, and here's my favorite. You and 3 oil company executives. The same people you say are destroying the planet. But I guess they're okay when they're offering you champagne and canapes. I was making a statement. Oh, you made a statement. All right, Kennedy agreed. The statement was rules are for poor people because that's what this looks like. You wore a dress that said, tax the rich while partying with the rich, accepting gifts from the rich, and then stiffing working-class vendors who did your hair and makeup. He pulled out a financial disclosure form. But wait, there's more. As they say on those late-night TV commercials, your boyfriend, Roberts again. He got a free ticket too, plus a $400 bow tie and 8 $800 shoes. Who pays $800 for shoes? For that price, they better come with their own driver. Partners of members are traditionally included. Traditionally? Kennedy nodded. Like it's traditional for me to pay my own way. But let's talk about transparency, since you're big on that. When the Ethics Committee asked for documentation about the Met Gala, how long did it take you to respond? Let me check. 4 months. And what did you provide? Heavily redacted documents. Black marker everywhere. Looked like a classified CIA file, not a party invitation. He pulled out another document. The Ethics Committee also found that you attended other similar events. The Vanity Fair Oscar party. That's in Los Angeles, so taxpayers paid for your flight. The White House Correspondents' Dinner. Designer dress provided free again. A charity gala in the Hamptons. I didn't even know socialists went to the Hamptons. I thought you all gathered in community gardens to share organic turnips. The hearing room rippled with nervous laughter. AOC's face had gone from pale to flushed and back again. But here's my favorite part, Kennedy continued, pulling out a tweet printout. The day after the Met Gala, you tweeted, Republicans are melting down because I went to a fancy party. They can't stand that a working-class woman of color was invited. Working class, Congresswoman, you make $174,000 a year. You live in a luxury apartment. You wear $15,000 outfits to parties. If you're working class, then I'm a runway model. He pulled out one final document from this section. The Ethics Committee concluded, and I quote, Representative Ocasio-Cortez violated House rules by accepting impermissible gifts and failing to properly disclose them. They recommended a formal reprimand and required you to take ethics training. Ethics training? That's like sending a fish to swimming lessons. But they found no evidence of corruption. No evidence of corruption. Kennedy peered at her over his glasses. Congresswoman, you took $15,000 in gifts, didn't pay for them until you got caught, and hid behind bureaucratic excuses. Where I come from, that's not just corruption. That's corruption with a side of arrogance and a dessert of hypocrisy. He closed the third section of his folder. You know what kills me about all this? Not the fancy parties or the expensive clothes. It's that you did all this while tweeting about how hard it is to afford rent in D.C. While your constituents in the Bronx and Queens struggle to pay for groceries, you're getting free designer dresses and $35,000 party tickets. That's like Marie Antoinette telling peasants to eat cake. Except Marie Antoinette probably paid her bills on time. You stiffed working people, makeup artists, hairstylists, drivers, while partying with billionaires. That's not democratic socialism. That's good old-fashioned elitism with an Instagram filter. AOC's phone had gone dark. Her staff had apparently given up trying to salvage the live stream. The viewer count, last anyone saw, was below 800,000 and falling fast. "She's all hat and no cattle," Kennedy concluded, using one of his favorite expressions. Big hat saying, "Tax the rich." No cattle because she's too busy partying with them to actually do anything about it. He reached for the fourth section of his folder. "Now, should we talk about those dance lessons? Because I've been dying to know, did the taxpayers at least get a good salsa performance for their money?" Kennedy pulled out a tablet, surprising everyone who assumed he couldn't operate technology more complex than a flip phone, and connected it to the hearing room's display system. After a moment of fumbling that might have been genuine or might have been theater, a spreadsheet appeared on the screen. "Now, I have to admit," he began, settling back in his chair like a man preparing to tell a favorite story, "when I first saw these expenses, I thought my staff had made a mistake. Dance lessons. Surely no member of Congress would charge taxpayers for learning to cha-cha. That would be like charging them for my swimming lessons. And trust me, nobody wants to see that." Nervous chuckles rippled through the room. AOC sat rigid, her hands clenched beneath the table. "But then I looked closer," Kennedy continued, highlighting a line on the spreadsheet. "November 15th, 2024, $850 to Juan D. Gonzalez for constituent services training." That's an interesting way to describe it. Were you training to service constituents through interpretive dance? Because, in Louisiana, we usually just answer their phone calls. He clicked to another document. December 3rd, 2024. Another $1,850 to Mr. Gonzalez for community engagement preparation. Community engagement. That's a fancy term, like calling a garbage man a sanitation engineer. The job's the same, but it sounds more important. "Those were legitimate training expenses," AOC started. "Oh, I'm sure they were legitimate," Kennedy agreed amiably. "Just like it's legitimate that Mr. Juan D. Gonzalez, who you said doesn't exist in any vendor database, has an Instagram account where he posts videos of himself teaching salsa to, and I quote, New York's elite, including politicians and celebrities." Here's a screenshot. The screen showed an Instagram post of a man in a dance studio with the caption, "Another great session with my congressional student." Remember your tax dollars at work? Our salsa life. Our deek dancing. The hearing room erupted. Even the Democrats looked shocked. "Now, he deleted this post about an hour after my staff found it," Kennedy noted. "But the internet is forever, like herpes or a bad credit score. Once it's out there, it stays out there." He pulled up another document. "But wait, it gets better. Bombazo Dance Company, the one that doesn't exist. Turns out it does exist, just not as a political training company. They're a wedding entertainment service. They specialize in, I'm reading from their website, turning your special day into a celebration of movement and passion." "I demand to know how you obtained their website," Kennedy asked innocently. "It's public, Congresswoman. Google.com. Even I know how to use that one, though I did have to ask my grandson to help with the bookmark thingy." He clicked through more documents. "Now here's what really puzzles me. Your member representational allowance, that's taxpayer money meant for official business, shows $850 paid to Bombazo Dance Company for staff development workshop. But Bombazo's invoice, which they mistakenly made public on their Facebook page, shows private bachata lessons for A. Ocasio-Cortez, 5 sessions. "Bachata!" Kennedy exclaimed with apparent delight. "That's a Dominican dance, isn't it? Very sensual. Lots of hip movement. I'm sure that's essential for conducting oversight hearings. Nothing says fiscal responsibility like a well-executed hip swivel." The gallery was in chaos. Several of AOC's supporters had quietly left. Others sat in stunned silence. But here's where it gets really interesting, Kennedy continued, pulling up an email. This is from your scheduler to Juan Gonzalez. The Congresswoman needs to move her lesson to 3 ontipims. She has a Ways and Means meeting at 2. So you were skipping committee meetings for dance lessons. That's like a firefighter leaving a burning building to practice the tango. This is character assassination, AOC protested. Character assassination, Kennedy pondered the phrase. No, ma'am. Character assassination is when you make things up. This is more like character suicide. You did this to yourself. I'm just reading the receipts. He pulled up another document. Speaking of receipts, let's talk about how you tried to justify these expenses. When the House Administration Committee asked about the payments, your office responded. And this is remarkable. The Congresswoman requires physical conditioning to maintain the stamina necessary for her demanding schedule. Kennedy removed his glasses, cleaning them slowly. Physical conditioning for a 35-year-old who posts Instagram videos of herself doing CrossFit. You needed taxpayer-funded dance lessons for stamina? I'm 73. I eat fried everything, and I haven't seen a gym since the Carter administration. But I managed to show up to work without charging taxpayers for jazzercise. He pulled up a series of photos. But let's see what this training produced. Here's a video from your Instagram posted December 20th, 2024, of you dancing at a holiday party. Very nice moves, very professional, almost like you'd had lessons. The video played on the screen. AOC executing perfect salsa steps at what appeared to be an upscale Manhattan party. The timing is interesting, Kennedy observed. 6 weeks of taxpayer-funded lessons, then suddenly you're dancing like a professional at parties with your millionaire socialist friends. It's like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, except the cocoon was made of taxpayer dollars. He pulled up another financial document. But here's what really gets me. While you were charging taxpayers for dance lessons, your campaign was spending $4,000 a month on Uber and Lyft. You couldn't take the subway like your constituents, but you could take their money for bacata. That's a complete mischaracterization. Is it? Kennedy pulled up a map. Your apartment to the Capitol, 2.3 miles. The metro goes directly there. Your constituents take it every day. But according to these expense reports, you took 200 rides in 2024 for distances less than 3 miles. Cost to taxpayers, $8,932. Cost to take the metro, $500. Difference, $8,432. That's a lot of bachata lessons. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more serious tone. You know what bothers me most about this? It's not the money, though $50 for dance lessons would feed a family for months. It's the attitude, the sense of entitlement, the belief that rules don't apply to you. You sit there tweeting about how Republicans don't care about working people while you use working people's money for salsa lessons. You lecture us about privilege while living like a princess on the public dime. That's not progressivism. That's good old-fashioned grift with a socialist hashtag. Kennedy pulled out one final document from this section. The Committee on House Administration has referred these expenses to the Ethics Committee for investigation. They're particularly interested in whether you filed false vouchers. That's a federal crime, by the way. 5 years in prison per count. How's that for a dance with consequences? AOC's face had drained of all color. Her phone lay silent on the table, the Instagram Live long since abandoned. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still going to root in the mud, Kennedy concluded. You can call dance lessons constituent training, but it's still going to be fraud. And you can pretend to be a woman of the people. But when you're cha-chaying on their dime, they're going to notice. He closed the fourth section of his folder, then looked at it thoughtfully. You know, I've been saving the best for last. Should we talk about your carbon footprint? Because for someone who thinks the world's ending in 12 years, you sure do burn a lot of jet fuel. The hearing room held its breath. AOC looked like she might bolt for the exit, but cameras were rolling, reporters were watching. She was trapped, and Kennedy was just getting warmed up. Don't worry, he added with that gentle smile. This is the last section. Then you can go back to Twitter and explain how this was all a vast right-wing conspiracy. Though you might want to work on that story during your next Uber ride. I hear the metro's unreliable. Kennedy pulled out a thick folder marked Environmental Impact Analysis and placed it on the table with the reverence of a preacher handling a Bible. He looked at AOC with an expression of grandfatherly concern that didn't quite mask the prosecutor's gleam in his eyes. Now, Congresswoman, he began, his voice taking on a philosophical tone, I've been thinking about something you said. The world's going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. Scary stuff. Makes me want to do my part. So I started looking at my own carbon footprint. You know what I found? He pulled out a simple chart. My 2024 carbon footprint, 15.2 tons of CO2. That's a bit above the American average of 12 tons. Not great. That's what happens when you like boudin and have to drive to find the good stuff. But then I thought, let me check yours, for inspiration. Learn from the expert. The screen displayed a professional analysis with MIT's logo. So I had some smart folks at MIT, the same ones who analyzed your Green New Deal, calculate your 2024 carbon footprint based on public records, flight data, and social media posts. Want to guess what they found? AOC remained silent, her jaw clenched. 287 tons, Kennedy announced, letting the number hang in the air. 287 tons of CO2. That's 19 times the average American. That's not a footprint. That's a crater. If carbon were oil, you'd be Saudi Arabia. He clicked to the next slide, showing a breakdown. Let's see where all this carbon came from. First, air travel. According to flight tracking data, public information, anyone can look it up. You took 47 flights on private jets in 2024. 47. That's almost one a week. I didn't know there were that many climate conferences. The screen showed a map with red lines crisscrossing the country. New York to Los Angeles for a fundraiser. 5.2 tons of CO2. New York to Miami for a speaking engagement. 2.8 tons. Oh, here's my favorite. New York to Boston. That's 190 miles. You took a private jet for a trip that's 3 hours by train. That's like taking a helicopter to your mailbox. Those flights were for official business. Official business? Kennedy pulled out a social media printout. This is your Instagram from the Miami trip. You're on the beach. With the caption, sometimes a revolutionary needs a break. That's official. What were you doing? Conducting oversight on sand castle construction. He clicked through more slides. But let's talk about your New York lifestyle. According to your financial disclosures, you maintain 2 residences, one in D.C., one in New York. Your D.C. apartment, according to building records, uses an average of 3,500 kilowatt-hours per month. The average American home uses 877. You use 4 times more electricity than a normal family. But here's the kicker, he continued, pulling up utility records. Your thermostat settings, obtained from a maintenance report your building filed publicly, show you keep your apartment at 68 degrees in summer and 75 degrees in winter. You're cooling it more in summer than you heat it in winter. That's like wearing a parka in July and a bikini in January. Makes about as much sense as your economic policies. AOC tried to interject, but Kennedy rolled on. Then there's transportation, he said, clicking to a new slide. We already talked about your Uber addiction, but let's add it up. 247 short Uber rides in D.C. Your staff confirmed you don't own a bicycle. You were photographed exactly once on the metro, the day after you were elected. That photo's been doing a lot of work for 4 years. He pulled out another analysis. MIT calculated that your ground transportation alone, just Ubers and the occasional limo, produced 8.7 tons of CO2 in 2024. You know what produces less than that? A soccer mom in a minivan driving her kids to practice every day. But I guess saving the planet doesn't mean you have to ride with the peasants. This is a ridiculous comparison. Is it? Kennedy asked. Let me show you something really interesting. He pulled up a tweet. January 2024, you tweeted, "Every person needs to examine their consumption habits. The planet depends on personal responsibility." Personal responsibility. That's rich coming from someone with the carbon footprint of a small industrial nation. He clicked to another slide, showing a large house. This is from your Instagram stories. Weekend getaway, you wrote. That's a 6,000-square-foot house in the Hamptons. Rental records show it goes for $10,000 a week. But let's talk about the carbon. Heating that house for your weekend produces more CO2 than a minimum wage worker produces all year. But they need to examine their consumption habits. The screen showed more receipts. Restaurant receipts from your FEC filings, $400